She entered the courtroom like it was another red carpet, chin lifted, sunglasses on, the faint click of designer heels echoing louder than the murmurs that followed her. For a moment, it didn't even feel like traffic court. It felt like a premiere, as if the world should pause simply because she arrived. People shifted in their seats, unsure whether to look at her or pretend they didn't care. But everyone felt the temperature change. Judge Caprio was mid-sentence, and she cut through the stillness with a dismissive wave, interrupting him as if he were an assistant on her payroll. "Can we make this quick?" she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I have real things to get to." The room froze. The officer who issued her citation blinked. A man in the back let out a low whistle. Even the clerk's fingers hovered above the keyboard, suspended in disbelief. Who interrupts Judge Caprio? Caprio didn't snap. He didn't scold. He simply lifted his eyes, slowly, with a calm so controlled it almost felt like the air tightened. No anger. No rush. Just that steady, piercing look that said more than a raised voice ever could. Her expression faltered for half a second, barely noticeable. But real, and in that silence, entire courtroom sensed it. She had miscalculated, badly. What none of them knew, not even her, was just how spectacularly this moment was about to backfire. And it would happen faster than anyone expected. What happened in that split second after her interruption wasn't just a breach of courtroom etiquette, it was the spark hitting dry grass. Everyone in the room felt it. The whispers began almost immediately, rippling through the benches like a rising tide. A mother leaned toward her teenage son and muttered, "Who does she think she is?" A man near the doorway shook his head and whispered, "She really tried that with Caprio." Even the clerk exchanged a startled glance with the officer, both silently agreeing this wasn't going to end the way she expected, because this moment wasn't truly about a parking violation. It wasn't about a citation, a fine, or even her infraction. It was about something larger, something Americans recognize instantly, the clash between undeserved privilege and earned respect. She walked in with the full weight of celebrity arrogance, convinced the room revolved around her schedule. Caprio sat with the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades listening to ordinary people. Immigrants, workers, mothers, fathers, those who fought for every inch they gained. In her world, influence bent rules. In his, fairness was non-negotiable. And although no cameras were officially allowed, people were already typing under their breath, thumbs flying beneath the benches. Imagined captions formed in real time, as if the internet itself could feel the drama brewing. This socialite is about to learn today. Caprio doesn't play favorites. Entitlement versus integrity, place your bets. The energy in the courtroom shifted from surprise to anticipation, the kind that makes strangers lean closer, to see what happens next. But while the murmurs grew and her impatience sharpened, tapping her heel, rolling her eyes as if the room wasn't worthy of her time, Caprio remained steady. His silence was deliberate, a pause loaded with meaning. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't even mildly ruffled. He was calculating, and that was the difference. She came prepared to dominate. He came prepared to listen. She expected compliance. He expected accountability. Only one of them understood what true authority looked like. But the real explosion wasn't the interruption. It was the moment Caprio asked her one simple question. She hadn't always walked into rooms, expecting them to rearrange themselves around her, but it didn't take long for the world to teach her that they would. Born into the kind of wealth most people only read about, she grew up in a mansion where the staff outnumbered the family. By the time she could walk, she'd already learned that requests weren't spoken, they were expected. And when she reached her teens, the tabloids began treating her like a character they helped write. The rebellious heiress, the glamorous wildfire. The girl who thought consequences were optional. Her fame didn't grow from talent so much as it grew from spectacle. A viral argument outside a nightclub, a controversial relationship with a producer twice her age, a feud that exploded on reality TV. Every scandal gave her more followers, more brand deals, more invitations to events where cameras flashed like a permanent halo above her. And as the spotlight grew, so did her sense of invincibility. The world rewarded her every misstep with attention. and attention became the currency she valued most. Yet despite her curated philanthropic image, the charity galas, the filtered photos serving meals for 10 minutes. Before her publicist pulled her away, she treated people around her like accessories. She talked endlessly about supporting the community, but waiters, drivers, assistants, and receptionists could all tell the same story. She snapped her fingers when she wanted something, rolled her eyes when told no, and demanded exceptions wherever she went. To her, rules were flexible, and dignity was negotiable. Behind closed doors, she was notorious for the line that followed her like a shadow. "Do you know who I am?" It had worked at restaurants. It had worked at airports. It had worked on producers, managers, photographers, even police officers who were too exhausted to argue with a celebrity. Headache at 2 a.m., her world had taught her that influence was a shield. Fame was armor, and attitude was leverage. Her PR team worked tirelessly to reshape her image into something softer, friendlier, more relatable. They posted carefully edited videos of her laughing with fans, hugging children, and standing beside nonprofit organizers. And online, many people believed it. But those who encountered her without a camera rolling knew better. She lived in two versions of herself, the public saint and the private storm. So when she walked into Caprio's courtroom, she carried that same assumption that this would be like every other encounter, that her name, her status, her confidence would bend the environment in her favor, that even a judge would tread lightly around her brand. She had no idea. She just stepped into a space where her tricks didn't matter, her status held no weight, and her attitude would collide with a man who defined authority in a completely different way. What she didn't know was that Caprio had dealt with far tougher cases and far bigger egos than hers. Long before Judge, Frank Caprio became a figure people across the country admired. He was a boy growing up in a world that demanded grit long before it offered comfort. His parents were immigrants who arrived in America with little more than faith that hard work could build a better life. Their home was small, the kind where winters felt colder and summers felt hotter, but it was filled with the kind of warmth money could never imitate. His father worked 2 jobs, one before sunrise, one long after dark, just to put food on the table and keep a roof steady over their heads. Caprio remembered the way his father's hands looked after a shift, scraped, tired, worn down, but never wavering. Those hands taught him everything about responsibility long before he ever learned the law, while other kids played outside. Caprio split his time between school and helping out wherever he could. He shoveled snow for neighbors who couldn't manage it. He delivered groceries to elderly families who barely spoke English. Service wasn't a duty, it was a way of life. His parents insisted that dignity came from how you treated people, especially people who had nothing to give you in return. When he grew older and found himself drawn to public service, he studied hard, worked harder, and built his career from the ground up with no shortcuts, no special treatment, no name to lean on. Every milestone came from the grit his parents had sewn into him, stitch by stitch. Eventually, he earned his place on the bench not because he knew the right people, but because he never forgot the faces of the people who needed someone to listen, and that listening became his signature for decades. Caprio sat in that courtroom and treated every case the same. Whether it involved a struggling single parent or a wealthy entrepreneur, he asked questions others ignored. He showed compassion others overlooked. People walked in expecting a judge, but walked out feeling they had met something rarer, a fair human being. The stories piled up: immigrant workers who couldn't afford tickets, veterans battling hardship, mothers juggling impossible choices. Caprio heard them all, and each one reminded him of the world he came from. A world where struggle was real, sacrifice was common, respect was never optional. That's why he never bowed to status. He didn't flinch when confronted with money, fame, impatience, or arrogance. How could he? He'd spent his life watching ordinary people carry burdens heavier than any socialite's ego. He'd watched his father come home late at night, exhausted but still standing. He'd seen neighbors fight through adversity without ever asking for praise. Compared to that, celebrity tantrums were nothing more than loud echoes in an empty room. And that's why he didn't get rattled, not when she interrupted him. Not when she tried to command the space, not when the room seemed eager for drama. He had weathered storms far fiercer than one person's entitlement. His strength didn't come from power. It came from purpose. And that purpose, protecting the underdog, honoring the working class, upholding dignity for all, was carved into him like a second spine. So as he looked at her, sitting there with entitlement rising off her like perfume, he wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He simply recognized a crossroads he'd seen many times before. Someone who desperately needed to learn what real respect looked like. And that's exactly why his next move stunned everyone, including her. She crossed her legs sharply, exhaling as if the very act of sitting in a courtroom was an inconvenience the universe should apologize for. "Can we move this along?" she said loudly. "I'm far too busy for all this." Her tone dripped with impatience, as though the dozens of people who rearranged their day to be here were simply background noise in the story of her life. A few people shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should look at her or at Caprio, who remained unmoved. When the officer began explaining the circumstances of the citation, she cut him off with a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, please," she said. "You targeted me because you know who I am." She gestured with an open palm, as if her fame were a shield that should have protected her from responsibility. "You followed me? You waited." This was personal. Her voice carried through the room in sharp, clipped bursts, meant to dominate, meant to overwhelm. The officer tried again, but she interrupted once more. "Don't pretend otherwise," she said, leaning back with a smirk. "People love to take shots at me. I get it. Comes with the territory." She tensed her jaw in satisfaction, confident her narrative had taken control. But Judge Caprio didn't react. He didn't take the bait. He let the silence fill the room, a silence so steady and intentional that it almost felt physical. She looked around, waiting for anyone to validate her outrage. No one did. Caprio's calm, almost serene expression made it clear he wasn't impressed. He wasn't intimidated. And he certainly wasn't convinced. Her voice rose again, sharper now, trying to regain the ground she felt slipping. "Look, I don't have time for this. I have commitments. I have obligations. I'm not like everyone else here." There it was, the line that made the entire room inhale at once. Still, Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift in his chair. He simply watched her, allowing her words to echo in the quiet she couldn't control. And the longer the silence stretched, the more her confidence wavered. The courtroom leaned in, sensing the tension tightening like a wire about to snap. Then Caprio leaned forward, and with just 5 words, he changed everything. For a single heartbeat, the entire courtroom seemed suspended in time. The socialite, perfectly styled, perfectly poised, perfectly convinced, she ruled the room, leaned back with a smirk that had irritated everyone except one man, Judge Caprio. He did nothing immediately. No gavel slammed. No words cut through the air. No raised voice. He simply leaned forward, resting his hands lightly on the bench, and asked, with the calm precision that made every word land harder, "Do you think you're better than everyone?" Her lips parted, then froze. The practiced smirk vanished, replaced by something raw, unguarded. Confidence, entitlement, and arrogance, the arsenal she carried everywhere, stilled like glass cracking under unseen pressure. For the first time since she entered, she wasn't in control. The judge was. The silence that followed spoke louder than any argument she could muster. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Someone whispered "wow" from the back. Even the officer who issued her citation shifted in his seat, sensing she had walked into a challenge she couldn't bluff her way out of. I never said that," she stammered, voice trembling. I'm busy. "I don't have time for," Caprio raised a hand not to interrupt, but to anchor the room. "And everyone here does?" he asked, soft but firm. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words. He didn't rush. Instead, he spoke with deliberate calm. Like a teacher correcting a child, every person who steps into this courtroom carries responsibilities, jobs, family, deadlines. But respect, he tapped the bench lightly, is not optional. It is the price of sharing a society. She straightened in her chair, trying to reclaim composure. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I was targeted. People know who I am." "That officer," the officer raised an eyebrow, silent. Caprio's gaze shifted to him. "Officer, did you know who she was when you stopped her?" "No, Judge," the officer replied. "I don't follow celebrity news. She ran a red light, almost hit a pedestrian. That's why I stopped her." The socialite's face tightened. "So you were treated differently," Caprio said to her, "but not in the way you claim." He let the words linger. "From the moment you walked in, you acted as if this courtroom was beneath you. As if the law bends for money, fame, or influence." She swallowed. Her jaw clenched. "But it doesn't. Not here. Not in this room." A sharp, defensive laugh escaped her. "You don't understand my life," she muttered. "I can't just drop everything for a traffic ticket." Caprio tilted his head. "And yet, here you are. Because no matter how high you rise, the rules of community still apply. You share the streets, breathe the same air, live under the same laws." Eyes flicked away. The first crack in her armor, Caprio continued, serene. "You said you don't have time. Let me tell you something. For nearly 4 decades, I've seen single mothers come in on lunch breaks, veterans in wheelchairs, elderly men walking blocks with canes, all showing more humility in the first minute than you have shown since walking in." She swallowed hard. "Let me ask you again," he said. "Do you think you deserve special treatment?" "No," she whispered, barely audible, almost painful. Caprio nodded. "In this city, everyone is treated with dignity. But dignity is a two-way street. You must give it to receive it." She gripped her designer purse. The audience sat mesmerized. The courtroom had become a masterclass in humility. He slid the citation forward. "You claim to be too busy, yet you had time to argue, belittle the officers, laugh during testimony, and present yourself as a victim. What you don't have time for is accountability." Another measured blow, delivered softly, precisely. Her face fell. "This court doesn't punish to embarrass," he said. "It holds people accountable, so we can all share the road safely. And so that none of us, regardless of wealth or fame, forget we belong to something bigger than ourselves." She wiped a hand across her cheek, buying time. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone," she admitted. "I believe you," Caprio said gently. "But intent does not erase impact. Today you had a chance to show leadership. Instead, you showed arrogance." Collective O rippled across the courtroom. Her facade was collapsing. Caprio lifted the citation one last time, locking eyes with her. "In life," he said, "respect is the one luxury no amount of money can buy. You earn it with how you treat people." The courtroom gasped. Knockout delivered, not with anger, but wisdom. She lowered her head, finally stripped of pretense. For the first time, she wasn't performing or hiding behind fame. She was just a person facing a lesson long overdue. Caprio dismissed the case with a modest fine and a reminder to drive safely. No theatrics. No harsh punishment. Just a calm, unforgettable correction. She nodded stiffly and walked out. But the real humiliation wasn't inside. It waited outside those doors. People were recording, whispering, watching. And the moment she stepped into the hallway, the fallout began. She wasn't ready for it. Because the true humiliation didn't happen inside the courtroom. It happened minutes after she walked, the moment she stepped out of the courtroom. The world erupted. What had been a contained, tense confrontation inside 4 walls instantly exploded across social media. Phones that had been discreetly recording now became the instruments of viral judgment. Clips of her frozen expression, stuttering responses, and Caprio's calm. Piercing dismantling of her arrogance spread faster than wildfire. Hashtags appeared within minutes. Hashtag Caprio moment. Hashtag respect the judge. Hashtag privilege fail. They trended nationwide, dominating timelines from coast to coast. Every post carried the same sentiment: astonishment, admiration, and a subtle, biting humor at her expense. Memes transformed her smirk into symbols of entitlement, frozen in time. GIFs captured Caprio's measured patience, replayed endlessly with captions praising dignity, integrity, and quiet power. Remixes added dramatic music, each iteration amplifying the sense that this wasn't just a courtroom moment, it was a cultural event. Even celebrities weighed in. A late-night host joked about how fame didn't exempt anyone from humility. A social media influencer posted a split-screen video comparing her interruption to Caprio's legendary stare, garnering millions of views in hours. Commentators on news channels dissected the exchange, applauding Caprio's calm authority and his ability to turn arrogance into a teachable moment. Political figures referenced the incident in speeches and interviews, using it to illustrate the collision between integrity and entitlement, service and self-interest. Meanwhile, her PR team scrambled. Drafts of apologies were revised, edited, and revised again. A carefully worded statement was released, attempting to show humility, but it landed flat. Phrases like, "I apologize if anyone was offended, and I respect the process," sounded hollow against the raw authenticity of Caprio's courtroom presence. Social media users responded with memes mocking the apology, twisting her words into punchlines and parodies. The more she tried to control the narrative, the more the world pushed back, amplifying the irony of her position. The national attention didn't just humiliate her, it cemented Caprio's standing as a figure of calm authority. Ordinary people praised him for embodying the values they wished more leaders would emulate: patience, fairness, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to dignity. Across Twitter threads, Facebook groups, and TikTok clips, audiences celebrated the heroism and everyday leadership, contrasting it with the spectacle of entitlement. And yet, for all the global mockery, Caprio remained silent about the social media storm. He didn't need to comment, to post, to defend. The lesson had already landed. His calm had done more than words ever could, and the nation was watching, not the celebrity, but the judge. But while the world mocked her, Caprio offered one last lesson she never expected. The courtroom had emptied, yet the echoes of what had just transpired lingered in the air, thick and electric. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair for a moment, not in triumph, but in quiet reflection. He addressed the lingering audience, his voice calm, resonant, carrying a lesson far bigger than a single case. "Every person who enters this courtroom," he began, "deserves to be treated with dignity. Not because of who they are, or what they own, or the followers they have online, but because dignity is a reflection of our shared humanity. Respect is not a gift reserved for the famous. It is the currency we pay to one another to build a just society." He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence that followed was not empty, it was contemplative, filled with the realization that what they had witnessed was more than a moment of embarrassment. It was a lesson in character, a blueprint for how integrity quietly shapes the world. In life, Caprio continued, celebrity can dazzle, wealth can impress, but neither can substitute for honesty, humility, and fairness. True power does not shout. True leadership does not demand. True respect is earned, moment by moment, choice by choice. The audience, both inside the courtroom and beyond through the viral clips spreading across the country, felt the weight of his words. Ordinary citizens nodded. Social media feeds paused mid-scroll. Even those who had come for spectacle were suddenly thinking about their own actions, their own conduct in everyday life. Dignity, he reminded them, was the quiet force that could topple arrogance. Integrity was the light that outshone even the brightest celebrity. Respect, no matter how fervently sought, could never be bought, could only be demonstrated. And in that quiet, cinematic moment, the villain of the story, the socialite whose ego had blinded, her stood humbled. Her facade had crumbled, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness that the world measured her not by fame or wealth, but by her choices and character. Meanwhile, the hero, the judge, who had seen countless egos crumble before him, stood taller not through anger, but through wisdom, fairness, and calm strength. The courtroom was a microcosm of a universal truth. Justice is not about spectacle. Power is not about status. Dignity, integrity, and respect define the true measure of a person. And if you believe dignity still matters, what we witnessed today was more than a courtroom confrontation. It was a lesson in character, humility, and the timeless power of dignity. The socialite walked in believing fame could shield her from consequence. She left realizing that arrogance has no place where integrity prevails, and that entitlement crumbles when faced with calm, unwavering justice. Judge Caprio reminded us all that the true measure of a person isn't in their wealth, their influence, or the attention they command. It's in the respect they show, the fairness they uphold, and the choices they make when no one is watching. This isn't just a story about one traffic ticket or one viral moment. It's a reflection of a universal truth. Dignity is earned. Integrity shines brighter than celebrity, and respect is never demanded, it's given to those who prove themselves worthy. So ask yourself, in your own life, are you lifting others with humility or seeking power through arrogance? Do you act with fairness or expect shortcuts because of status? The answers shape not only who you are, but how the world remembers you. If you believe respect is earned, join us. Subscribe for more stories where truth wins, where courage, integrity, and dignity are celebrated above all else. Share this video to remind someone that character still matters, that humility and fairness are the forces that endure long after fame fades. Because in Judge Caprio's courtroom and in life, dignity always rises above entitlement. And moments like these are a reminder: power is fleeting, influence is temporary, but the impact of respect, fairness, and true character is eternal. Stand with those values. Reflect on your own choices, and let every day be a testament to the enduring strength of integrity.